Well, our college is playing a game with the advertised tuition. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, the cost of tuition is bad enough for parents as they contemplate how to come up with the money needed for funding for college. What is worse is the lack of transparency and predictability when it comes to college costs. Prudent Money contributor and college expert John Hupalo is here to give us his thoughts. Hey, John, welcome to Prudent Money.
Bob, great to be with you again.
You know, first of all, with the shakeups that we've talked about, a lot of things have changed, especially with borrowing and how all that works. What are you seeing? I mean, you're kind of on the front lines and the day to day, and I would imagine that there's some colleges maybe that are panicking a little bit, some colleges that are having a tough time, some business as usual. What are you seeing?
Yeah, all of that, Bob, and it really depends, as we always talk about, sort of which school, where in the country, what's happening. But generally, it's somewhat interesting that enrollment trends are up slightly for 2025. They're up across the board about 2%. But interestingly, they're up 4% for community colleges and down a little bit in the grad space. And the reason why I say it's interesting is, we went through that period of the pandemic, 2021, coming out of it in 22, and here we are 3 years later with the 2025 data, and we see that the hardest hit sector of all of that, which were the community colleges, where those enrollments were off very big, they've rebounded nicely and are up. So the enrollment trends, up 2% to me in the world of that I live in, 2% is a small number, so I consider it to be kind of flat. But the good news is the enrollment trends are up and generally not down. But the point that you made at the outset here is really important, and that is the trends are changing. At the undergraduate enrollments, there's a lot of pressure on the schools, but the grad programs, they're under a lot of stress right now because of the big changes in the student loan programs that are going to affect those students in the coming years. So, yes, flux continues to be, I think, the right word to describe what's happening in higher education. But I'm going to say there's positives are now outweighing the negatives when it comes to how people are thinking about going to college, what makes sense for them. Should they be going to college? Should they get a certificate? Should they get a bachelor's degree? Should they go to community college? Should they find a way to a four-year school? There's a lot of reckoning that's going on. And I think overall, Bob, it's very healthy for everybody.
It's real interesting to me. I would just get your feedback on this. We've talked about how it could be a really, really good idea to go to the community college route and parlay that into, 2 years of public or private college, whichever works. But are you surprised? It seems like these numbers have jumped a little bit earlier than I thought that they would.
That's interesting because I think that your premise is correct. They did jump a little earlier, but a lot of that has to do with just the reality. Right, the students are a little bit older now, and they're also, the other part of the reality is that there are now lower cost opportunities. So if a student says, I want to be a welder, they're not likely to go to school and waste their time there. They're going to get to a welding program. They're going to become an apprentice. They're going to do whatever they do to get into those kinds of trades. And the students that are thinking, well, I want to be a nurse, or I want to have a degree in something or other, they're starting to look at the end result and saying, okay, realistically, how much money can I make with that particular degree? And what's the least cost for me to get there? And so going to community school for a couple of years and then going to a 4-year to finish off, or just using the community college degree, I think the students are getting a lot smarter about trying to minimize the total cost, because the expenses can be enormous across the board. So they're thinking about it a lot smarter out of the box. Again, I'm pretty bullish, meaning positive, that students are thinking about this more clearly, and they're finding better paths to lower cost education that gets them a job. No matter, they're going to get the job and make the same amount of money no matter how much their education costs, so they might as well minimize that cost of education.
Yeah, I think that the takeaway is people, families are communicating, talking about things in real, very realistic terms. You know what's interesting, and I would love to get your feedback on this because I've always thought this was such a great model, is to where you have a community college where the student goes for a couple of years, and then they're already connected to a major college through that community college link, and everything transfers over, and they know that when they're done with 2 years in community college, they're going to that bigger college. And it seems like that would be an ideal situation. Is that really, has that been something that has gotten a lot of attention?
Well, it's gotten a lot of attention from the perspective that at one time there were barriers to that. And the barrier was go to a 2-year community college, and then the 4-year school would say, well, we'll take X number of those credits, and you have to redo these. So
right.
The cost became a problem, right? Well, the fancy term for this is articulation agreement. And so they have these articulation agreements, which basically say in advance exactly what you said. Go to this 2-year school. We're going to take all those credits so you don't have to redo them and incur an additional expense when you come to the 4-year school. And some of the state university systems, like in Texas and California and some other places, they have these articulation agreements now in place for a number of years where the students are actually saying, okay, I am saving money and I am getting the degree that I'm looking for. So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's easier. There's less stress involved with it. There's some certainty. As a student, I know what the cost is going to be. I do my part. I know what it's going to look like in 2 years or 4 years. So that's been a huge step forward for students and, frankly, for the university systems as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this this notion of an advertised price and then the real discounted price. It makes no, I'm sure there's a great reason for it, a profitability reason for it, but it just makes no sense to me why, while we're on two different wavelengths, and this is all the colleges, I'm assuming, what's going on with that?
Well, if we were on TV instead of the radio, Bob, you'd see me kind of smiling or grinning or smirking, whatever it is my mother told me I was doing in this circumstance, because you, again, are in the exact right place. So you started the top of the show by talking about a lack of transparency, and there is a real lack of transparency around college pricing. And this becomes a little bit more of a discussion because it truly depends. So let's just say that there are basically two kinds of colleges: state-run colleges, the university systems in the states, and then private colleges. And there's a world of difference between the two of them. But on the state-based side, the in-state schools, the price discrepancies there are significantly less. Right, and the reason they're significantly less is many of them have financial aid that comes from state programs or whatever it might be. So there's less of a reliance on big endowments like there are in the private colleges. So on the private college side, I hope you're probably sitting down, but I hope you're sitting down when I tell you that the average tuition discount last year was 56%.
56%.
And so what that means, 56%. So that means the average private school, if the tuition and fees was, I'll just pick a number, I call it $60,000, right? If the tuition and fees was 60, that means that student was really only paying something on the order of like 26,000 or 28,000, whatever that math is.
Right.
And the other thing is, Bob, that it's really important. This is a real heads up for your listeners. When we talk about the advertised prices, you said it, in the parlance and the phrases around the college admissions process, we're talking about the sticker price. If I go on the web page of a college, they tell me its tuition and fees is $40,000, and then room and board is almost always about half of that same amount. So
Right.
it might be that the total cost of attendance is $60,000, but the school, the private college, is discounting the tuition and fees at 56%. So the net price, which is the one the families really need to worry about, how much is it going to cost them to go to that college, not what the website says it's going to cost. The net price to a family differs significantly. Some of those folks are getting a full 56% discount. Some are getting no discount. Some are getting 80% discount. But when it all comes out in the wash, the average discount is 56%. So it is confusing. And I'll say, we said some nice things earlier about the articulation agreements between community colleges and the in-state schools and how nice that process is. I'll say on the other side of that coin, the issue that you identified, which is transparency, I think all of the schools are purposely not transparent because they want to hold the cards when it comes to doling out their financial aid to the students that they want to give the aid to. So it's a big, big game.
So how do you get let's say, you're a student and you're a junior, you're looking ahead, you want to go you've been talking to some schools, you kind of got it narrowed down. How do you have that conversation? Because you as you talk about, this student over here got this kind of a discount, but look at what this student over here got, this huge discount, and everybody wants that huge discount. How do you do you negotiate that, or how does that conversation go?
Yeah, it all starts with filing the FAFSA form, quite honestly, right? Getting in the financial aid process. And so for your listeners, if they're seniors in high school right now, they should have filed that FAFSA. It was opened up on October 1. By the way, the process is significantly better than it ever has been. I think that they've done a really nice job of fixing that whole problem. But that's where it starts. You have to file the first form. And if you're going to one of these private colleges, they may ask for another form that the College Board offers, which is and requires, I'm going to say the schools require the College Board form called the CSS profile, and that's where all the financial information goes. So I want to get that out there because that's the basis for this whole awarding of financial aid. And so once all that information goes in, the federal government sends the file over to the school and says, well, this student has this student aid index, which is an indication of how much aid they may be eligible from the federal government. And the college looks at that and says, okay, if the feds are offering this amount and we really like this student, Johnny's one of our best in class, so we're going to offer them merit-based aid. So we've got the need-based aid that comes basically from the result of these calculations done mostly by the federal government. And then the schools, and it's mostly the private schools, have large pots of merit-based aid that they use then to basically come up with these discounts on a per-student basis. So as I said, they really like Johnny because he's a great football player, and Sally is at the top of her class academically. So they just dole out the money based on how much they think they have to offer a student to come to their school. It's called enrollment management in the business terms. And we've talked about this before, Bob, and I'm a little bit on a soapbox here, but it's a great opportunity to tell your listeners again that this is a consumer-based transaction. The school is one party in the transaction, and the family is the other party in the transaction. And there is some negotiation that's available there because they're purchasing an education. And they should think of themselves as consumers and go about this, try to collect as much information as they can in advance to get on a better term with the school and have a better way to negotiate.
Now, not to be Captain Obvious when I ask this question, but I think that there are probably listeners that feel like that, man, I need to ask this question, but boy, this is a kind of a dumb question. And about dumb questions, there is no dumb question. But when you talk about financial aid, what does that encompass? Is that part? Does it encompass part of the markdown on the college costs, or is that where you conveniently put scholarships? Or talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you have a great way, which is why you're so good at your job and
I
hosting
don't
the
know about
show.
that.
You have a great way. You have a great way of asking what sounds like a simple question, but there's actually an onion there that needs to be unpeeled. And this one is a perfect one: financial aid. Okay, what is that? Well, at the highest level, you file those forms I told you about, and the school comes back, and every student gets a financial aid award letter that's going to get some money. And on that award letter, it will say, oh, this you're going to get this much of a Pell Grant from the federal government. You're going to get school presidential scholarship or school presidential grant. So for your listeners, the real aid is in the form of grants and scholarships, and it will say that on the financial aid award letter. And the reason that that's really key is that that money doesn't have to be repaid or earned. It's called aid, right? Also
Right.
on that aid letter is maybe a financial aid award of a work-study job from the federal government. And all that is an indication that the student could be eligible to earn that money. So it doesn't actually reduce the dollar cost of the program or the fees that you're paying for the tuition and room board and all that. It's just an opportunity to earn some money. But again, it shows up as financial aid. And then the last part of that equation is the borrowing. So on a financial aid award letter, it may say federal direct student loan. And loan means it has to be repaid. But your simple question of like, what is aid? It comes in three forms. Actual free money, which I think is the true aid because it doesn't have to be repaid, it doesn't have to be earned. There's the work-study money, which has to be earned and is not guaranteed, but it's on the aid award letter. And then the loans, which have to be repaid. So when they boil it all down, the school will say, after we give you the free money, the net cost to you is X dollars, and you either pay through your savings or however you can raise that money or go get loans. But at the end of the day, you have to pay the net amount that we are offering you. So it's the sticker price less the free aid, so that's the grants and the scholarships, leaves you an amount that you have to pay. And you pay that out of your savings, out of your current income, maybe out of a tuition payment plan. And then after that's done, you have to borrow money. The student can borrow the federal direct loans, and the parents have other opportunities to either borrow from the federal government or from private lenders. So it's a really simple question that is a rather complicated answer. And at mycollegecorner.com, we try to provide some information there. There's some webinars there and some others, all free, to try to peel this onion a little bit for folks who are trying to go through this for the first time and need some help.
You know what, though? To me, the way that you section it out, it makes it totally understandable. But I think that what ends up happening is that since, the student loans especially are just so easy to get, that, it's like, well, let me just take care of this here, and then we'll worry about it later and deal with it at some other time. And I was thinking about this, about to call a student loan financial aid is very deceptive, I think. What do you think about that? I think they should call it for what it is. It's a student loan. I mean, it's debt. It's not like getting a job and working while you're going to school. I mean, it's liabilities.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it's not right, but the federal government does it, and they allow it. Let's put it that way. They allow the schools to package. Remember, we talk about the package that the school is offering the student on the financial aid side, and in the package are those three components of it. And some schools, Bob, it's even worse. That not only does the school say the student can go and get this direct loan, which, by the way, I am a proponent actually of the direct loan program. I think for a senior or anyone else, a senior in high school and then freshmen, sophomore, juniors in college who don't have an income and they need something to get to school, the direct loan program is actually a pretty responsible way to borrow. And if you come out with your job, the key to all this, Bob, is that the student completes the program. When we read about these big, massive default rates on student loans, a very large percentage of those are students who did not complete their education. So they didn't get the benefit of the degree, and they're saddled with a loan. Those are the people who are in most trouble. But the others, they go through the program, they take a direct loan, they get a job, they can pay off that loan. It might take 7 or 10 years, but they can pay off that loan. And they find themselves not really getting in trouble. But the government also has let colleges say to parents, you can borrow on top of the federal student loan as a parent, and then all of a sudden it looks like the school is zero cost to the family. But they bundled in a whole bunch of loans, just as you said. And the word criminal comes to mind, but the government, they say you can do it, so that means it's not criminal. But I
Don't get me started.
Yeah. Talk about a lack of transparency. That is at the total top of my list. But I think you've uncovered some really great topics today, and I hope that your listeners get some benefit of understanding just what the facts are around all of this.
So, do you ever put some thought into looking down the road, maybe 5 to 10 years? What is what do you think, and I'm catching a little bit off guard, but what do you think higher education is going to look like? Do you think that it's going to be some of the problems that need to be reformed are going to be reformed, or what exactly do you think?
So I've said this before, I think the big beautiful bill from July is setting the stage for a much better opportunity for students because they're unlikely to be in a situation where it's easy for them to overborrow, particularly the graduate students. Now, the schools are not liking this at all. You asked at the top of the show what's going on. The graduate schools right now are all upside down because they used to have, before July this year, basically an open seat of money from the federal government to fund their programs through these Grad Plus loans, and the government's basically shut that down. So there's going to be a reconciling of what these programs are, how much they cost, and who's coming. But the other thing that's really important is that the Congress is starting to understand the importance of apprenticeships. There's a lot of movement now around trying to get the trades to start sponsoring apprenticeships. And again, the idea is not necessarily college. The idea is, what does the student want to do, and what post-secondary education? So what do they need after high school to do that job, right? Maybe an apprenticeship will do it. Maybe a community college will do it, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree. Maybe they're going to realize that they don't need to go to get that graduate degree in English to do whatever it is that they want to do. So I think in 5 or 10 years from now, and that could be the right time frame after all of this turbulence happens in the next year or two, because there will be people who are going to come out of this not in a great situation in the next 2 years. And that's natural when these markets evolve and erupt the way they have. But this is what's going to happen. But in the 5-year time period, I think there'll be better opportunities for high school students to look out and say, okay, here's the job I want. Here's a path that might not take me through an expensive 4-year college, but I'm going to get the education I need. And for those students, they want to be doctors, and they want to be chiropractors, and they want to be whatever they want to be. They can go through the 4-year traditional route, either an in-state school less expensive, maybe a private school. And of course, the private schools are not necessarily more expensive than the in-state because they're discounting their tuition at 56%. So there's a lot to it, but I'm actually very optimistic now that there are going to be much more opportunities for students ahead to find a lower cost, better program for themselves.
Well, great information, John. Once again, mycollegecorner.com is the site to go to. Lots of resources there. And listen, we'll get together next January. That seems like a long time away. In January and talk again. But between, if I don't talk to you, Merry Christmas to you and your family.
And you and yours, Bob. Be well, and to all your listeners, the best of the holidays.
This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.